Hey guys, Matthew here. In this video I want to talk about these ray tracing options and pretty much mainly this anti-aliasing filter option. Now, the global illumination rays are kind of focused on how many rays get sent out into the scene. The actual ray trace kind of settings here are focused on how many rays are related to each individual pixel in a way. That's how I understand it. And when we move this setting around, you'll notice that a couple of things change. The min-max subdivs, i.e. how many rays per pixel gets changed, and also the noise limit gets changed. It gets a smaller and smaller limit and a larger and larger limit. So the noise limit is being used to define how many kind of rays get sent into each pixel, I'm fairly sure. Nevertheless, you can play with those numbers however you want to begin to actually remove noise from the image. But I want to look at this anti-aliasing filter option for one moment. And you'll notice that it's on by default and it's set to something called Lancos. Now, there are several kinds of filters here. Lancos, Catmull Rom, triangle, box, area. I'm going to change it to an area filter and I'm going to give it a filter size of 4 to highlight exactly what that kind of filter does. And I'm not going to render the entire image, I'm just going to render a portion of it. And I'm going to make sure that it's all this global illumination stuff set to be quite low power. I might actually put it down to low and then press render. And we're back. And you'll notice that the area filter actually makes the image look much, much blurrier. And if I cut that back down to 2 as it was before, and give it another render, which doesn't take a long time, it just takes a while for it to actually start triggering the process for some reason. You'll notice that it's still slightly blurrier than the other filter around it. So these image filters have a fair big effect. So I want to draw your attention to the fact that you lose Lancos by default, but there's another one here called Catmull Rom, and what that does, if I sit there and draw a rectangle, is press render, and we're back, and you'll notice that the Catmull Rom gives a far sharper edge than the other image filters. So the Catmull Rom, which you might want to argue should be used for architectural rendering because it gives very sharp edges, is one of the options you might want to look at. And then the other ones are kind of more blurry, but Lancos by default is fairly good. Nevertheless, there's one more option you might think about doing, in which you might turn the filtering off altogether and try and do it in post-production. So I rendered out this image with no filtering and I've opened it in Photoshop. So this is a little bit bigger. I've gone to make this 1000 pixels wide by 3000 pixels tall. So it's a much taller image. And you can actually make it, you can do it in post by using something called an Unsharpening Mask. So I've made this a smart object just so I can edit it in post if I feel like I need to. And if we go to Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask, you'll get this dialog box. And I just want to walk through this pretty quickly. I'm going to up this radius to be something fairly ridiculous, 27.7, and I'm going to increase the amount to something insane. And you'll notice that what we end up getting is we end up getting kind of a heightened contrast where Photoshop finds edges. And at the moment, it looks fairly strange because these numbers are ridiculously high. The radius is measured in pixels, so this number should be, you know, somewhere between 1 and 2, maybe 3 if you're pushing it. And then the amount is how high that contrast is pushed. So you can begin to do some simple post-production about how kind of slightly blurry or how slightly sharp the image is in post by turning the V-Ray anti-aliasing filter off and doing it using this method. The threshold, again, also helps you decide where edges are. So if I bash this up again and play with the threshold, you'll notice that as the number goes up, it finds less and less edges. As the number goes down, it finds more and more edges. I'm going to change that back to 2. I'm going to change this to 40 and say I'm happy with this and press OK. The image will be saved like that. So if I zoom into the image, so I can see where perhaps a theoretical couple of edges might be and turn the smart filter on and off, you'll notice that this is kind of blurrier in a way than this. This looks a lot more sharp and a lot more defined, especially on the windowsills, than the non-Unsharp masked version. So this is another method of how you might go about doing that. And again, all of this comes down to your personal aesthetic choices, but this is something you should be aware of, that you can do it through this method and do it in post and have a fair bit of control over it, or if you're willing to read the documentation and begin to have an understanding of what these algorithms here imply, you can do it in that manner as well. So that's all for this video, and I'll see you in the next one.